We begin with the latest developments in the January 6th investigation. The National Archives and Records Administration wants to know how the Secret Service lost text messages linked to the assault on the Capitol. The agency confirmed yesterday that the messages cannot be recovered. It says they disappeared during a long-scheduled service update last year. Scott MacFarlane is on Capitol Hill, where the January 6th committee is preparing for tomorrow night's hearing.
Vlad and Anne-Marie, good morning. There will be some key witnesses at this primetime hearing tomorrow who worked inside the Trump White House on January 6, 2021. In the meantime, the search for those missing text messages has many people here searching for answers. Tuesday's deadline for the Secret Service came and went. Some of the text messages exchanged within the agency on January 5th and 6th, 2021 remain missing, not handed over despite a subpoena from the January 6th Select Committee, potentially deleted and irretrievable.
Well, one thing I've learned in this process is that when one evidentiary door closes, another one will open, and we'll find a way.
The National Archives has ordered an internal review of what it calls unauthorized deletion of texts by the Secret Service, which this morning is pledging full cooperation. The January 6th committee have been seeking the records ahead of Thursday's primetime hearing, which the panel says will show dereliction of duty by former President Trump during the riot, despite urgent warnings from his inner circle. Two White House aides who quit after the attack, former Deputy National Security Advisor Matt Pottinger and Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Matthews will be the star witnesses. And John Wood, a former lead investigator on the January 6th committee, told CBS News the panel will show Trump's inaction that day.
I think they need to finish by focusing on those critical 187 minutes between when the attack on the Capitol started and when Donald Trump finally issued a video statement asking people to leave the Capitol.
Meanwhile, this morning, the Justice Department presents a second day of witnesses in the contempt of Congress trial of former Trump strategist Steve Bannon, who's criminally charged with stonewalling this committee. Tuesday, a committee aide testified the panel's subpoena wasn't optional, had a clear deadline, and that Bannon's testimony was needed. After sitting silent with a mask much of the day, Bannon uncorked his criticism for the committee members outside.
Have the guts and the courage to show up here and say exactly why it's a crime.
Committee members tell us we will hear more of that pre-taped deposition with former Trump White House counsel Pat Cipollone at tomorrow's hearing. But one familiar face will likely be missing tomorrow. Committee Chairman Benny Thompson says he has tested positive for COVID, but that the proceedings will continue even in his absence. Vlad, Anne-Marie.
All right, Scott, thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate it. With us now is CBS News legal contributor Keir Dougall. So, Keir, I just keep thinking, Anne-Marie and Keir, about the recovered text messages from Peter Strzok and Lisa Page.
Oh, yeah.
I keep thinking about the recovery of Hillary Clinton's emails, which Congress was able to have hearing after hearing after hearing over these missing emails, but her emails. So to be able to say to these officials that there is no record of these text messages at all, that takes planning. That takes, you got to delete a server and then delete the backup server.
Completely.
I mean, I'm not an IT nerd, but like that's what I'm thinking.
I thought to myself, well, maybe the Secret Service has sort of another level of security, but I thought the same thing that you did. We know there's a cloud. This stuff goes somewhere.
So if it's not there, Keir, what are the legal requirements for the United States Secret Service to maintain records such as these? Presumably text messages between the agency and even members of the Trump administration, perhaps even the president himself.
Well, they're simple. They're required to be kept. Listen, the Secret Service does more than protect the president, right? They have jurisdiction over several crimes, counterfeiting crimes, a number of financial fraud crimes. So a communication by a Secret Service agent in the line of duty on a agency device is going to be an agency record. It's in the mill run of cases, it's going to be an investigative record, and it's also likely to be evidence. So there are a number of federal statutes that make it a crime to intentionally delete or destroy agency records. There are also, in an investigation, there are obligations to the court and to the investigation itself. And of course, Agent 101, Law Enforcement Agent 101, is to maintain the chain of custody of your evidence and get the receipts. And so all of this is very hard to explain. Your questions are the right ones.
So then, hard to explain is one thing, but could there be legal repercussions?
Yes, absolutely. So, we don't have much detail from the reporting about how this update or purge was implemented. But if it was not done with your sort of basic safety checks, we're not going to delete your phone until we have the receipt that your phone has been uploaded to the cloud, to the server. There's a number of different ways you can imagine for doing that. But if those protocols were not in place, if it was simply, hey, we're going to delete everything in 3 days, and by the way, I hope you get your phone uploaded. If somebody put a protocol like that in place, that person needs to get a good criminal defense lawyer ASAP. That's sort of the first immediate concern. The second concern is if these text messages or agency records relate to any one of these of an ongoing Secret Service prosecution of a crime that the Secret Service has jurisdiction over, I would be looking for and expecting to see defense motions in cases across the country asking about whether or not evidence that might support a defense in that case has gone missing. Motions that have the capacity, the potential to upend those cases. This is potentially a very large problem for the Secret Service. We simply don't know yet. When you focus on January 6th, one of the questions that I would ask if I was looking at this is there a correlation between the phones that didn't get uploaded and the agents that were on the president's protection detail on January 6th? It's one thing if there's just a random distribution of phones that didn't get captured across the Secret Service agent population. It would be a whole nother kettle of fish if, a surprise, surprise, the phones that didn't get uploaded were tightly correlated with the agents that were on the president's detail. That would make it look like it was perhaps an effort to conceal or obstruct. So I think that we have a number of questions that hopefully will get developed as time goes on.
Yeah.
So, Keir, let me ask you about this new Justice Department memo that discusses the guidelines surrounding investigations or indictments of major political figures ahead of elections. What does the memo say, and how do you interpret it when it comes to any potential investigation of the former president?
So that memo by Merrick Garland is a continuation of memos that have been issued by prior administrations, both Republican and Democratic administrations in prior years. And effectively it says that because the Justice Department doesn't want to interfere with political elections, doesn't even want to have the appearance of interference, to the extent that there are going to be investigative or prosecutive steps in a case that has political sensitivities, they have to be approved at the very, very highest levels of the Justice Department to make sure that a step, if it's going to be taken, is absolutely necessary that it be taken. Like you're worried about destruction of evidence, or there's a statute of limitations that's about to expire. But unless there is an extremely compelling reason, the guidance continues to be and has been, you don't take those steps close to an election without extremely high level approval at the Justice Department.
I had a conversation. I interviewed the former Attorney General Eric Holder yesterday for CBS Mornings, and he told me that if he were the Attorney General right now, with all that he's seen, he would be looking in an indictment of former President Trump and at least some of his associates. And he didn't really said that before. And I did ask him, Keir and Anne-Marie, about what kind of precedent that would set. In other words, a current administration indicts the president or members of the administration of a previous administration. What kind of precedent does that set going forward? And he says that he struggled with that because it is potentially significant.
Yes,
I mean, it is not potentially.
It's not just that. To what Keir just talked about, we're talking about somebody who has already signaled very strongly that he plans on running again in 2024. So this is a potential candidate to what Keir was talking about,
Right.
that you may be putting your finger on the thumb of an election.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. Keir, thank you very much.